My beloved child. There is a reason your name has never felt ordinary when spoken in certain rooms. You may have noticed it before the pause that comes after an older relative says it, the strange softness in their eyes, the way one person in your family quickly changes the subject whenever someone asks who chose it. Perhaps you dismissed those moments as coincidence. Perhaps you told yourself that every family carries unfinished stories, and yours was no different. But somewhere beneath the everyday sound of your name, a hidden history has been waiting. And now, after years of silence, someone is preparing to speak. Not because they suddenly became brave, and not because the past has lost its power. They are preparing to speak because something happened recently that made silence feel more dangerous than truth. It began in a quiet house at the edge of evening. Rain tapped against the windows, not heavily, but steadily enough to make the rooms feel smaller. A lamp glowed beside an old wooden cabinet that had not been opened in years. The person standing before it had walked past that cabinet hundreds of times. They knew what it contained, or at least, they believed they did. Old documents. Faded photographs. Letters from relatives whose voices had long disappeared from the world. But that evening, they were searching for something else. Their hands trembled as they removed a stack of papers tied with a pale ribbon. Beneath them was a thin envelope, yellowed at the corners, with one word written across the front. Your name. Not a version of it. Not a family surname. Your exact name, written long before anyone should have known it would belong to you. The person holding the envelope stopped breathing for a moment. They had seen it once before. Many years ago, when you were still too young to understand why the adults around you spoke in whispers, this same envelope had appeared during an argument behind a closed door. Voices had risen. Someone had cried. Another person had demanded that it be destroyed. But it was not destroyed. It was hidden, moved from one place to another, guarded by people who told themselves they were protecting you. Yet protection and secrecy are not always the same thing. Sometimes a secret begins with love and slowly becomes a burden. Sometimes people hide the truth because they fear what it might change, only to discover that the silence changes even more. The one who found the envelope that evening sat down at the kitchen table. The rain continued outside. A clock ticked on the wall with painful clarity. For several minutes, they only stared at your name. Then they whispered, "You should have been told." Those words did not come easily. They carried years of guilt. Because your name was not selected from a book. It was not chosen simply because it sounded beautiful. It was connected to a promise made during one of the most difficult seasons your family had ever endured. A promise so personal that only a few people knew it existed. And one of those people had spent years pretending they had forgotten. You may have sensed this hidden weight without knowing its source. There may have been moments when you wondered why you felt strangely disconnected from the story your family told about you. Why certain explanations sounded polished but incomplete. Why the details surrounding your earliest days seemed to shift depending on who was speaking. One relative remembered one thing. Another insisted it happened differently. And when you asked a simple question, "Why did you name me this?" you may have received an answer that felt too quick. Because the true answer required opening a door no one was ready to walk through. Until now. The secret is not that your name belongs to someone else. It is not that your identity was invented. The truth is more emotional than that, and far more complicated. Your name was given to you after a message arrived. It came during a night when your family believed they were about to lose something precious. The house was crowded, but everyone felt alone. A phone rang after midnight. Footsteps moved quickly through a hallway. Someone sank into a chair, covering their face with both hands. And in the middle of that fear, an elderly woman in your family, someone whose influence still lingers even if you barely knew her, spoke your name aloud. You had not yet been born. Some would later say she chose the name because it had belonged to a distant relative. Others said she had heard it in a dream. But the few who were present knew that neither explanation was complete. She said your name as if she were remembering, not inventing. Then she made everyone in the room promise something. She said, "When this child comes, do not let them believe they arrived by accident." No one fully understood what she meant. Not then. The crisis passed. Life continued. The family carried on, but the words remained. When you were born, your name became the fulfillment of that promise. It represented survival, reconciliation, and a second chance that several members of your family did not believe they deserved. But there was another part to the story. A part they removed whenever they spoke of it. Your arrival did not only bring joy. It forced someone to confront a choice they had made years earlier, a choice that had quietly divided the family. One person saw your name as a blessing. Another heard it as an accusation. That is why your name could change the atmosphere in a room. To one person, it meant hope. To another, it reopened an old wound. And to someone else, it reminded them of a letter they had never answered. The letter inside the envelope was not written to you. It was written about you before your life began. The handwriting was uneven, as if the person had been rushing or crying. The first lines described a mistake. The next lines spoke about forgiveness. But near the middle of the page was a sentence that changed everything for the person reading it now. If the child is ever given this name, they must one day know why. That sentence had been ignored. Year after year, birthdays passed. Family gatherings came and went. People smiled for photographs while the envelope remained hidden. Every time someone considered telling you, fear returned. What if the truth made you angry? What if it caused you to look differently at someone you loved? What if you discovered that certain people had remained in your life not because everything had been healed, but because your existence had become the bridge keeping them together? So they waited. They told themselves you were too young. Then they told themselves the timing was wrong. Then they began hoping the secret would disappear with the people who carried it. But secrets tied to love rarely disappear. They move through a family in quieter ways. They appear in hesitation, in overprotectiveness, in unexplained tears, in the way someone holds onto a photograph too long before handing it back. Perhaps this explains why one older person in your family always looked at you as though they were trying to say something without words. Perhaps this is why they defended you even when they did not fully understand your choices. They were not only seeing who you had become. They were remembering what your name once prevented from falling apart. You were never responsible for repairing your family. But without knowing it, your presence changed the direction of several lives. One person gave up something harmful because they wanted to be worthy of knowing you. Another returned home after years of distance. Someone who had refused to forgive finally entered the same room as the person who had hurt them. None of this made the past perfect. It did, however, make a future possible. And this is why the secret matters now. Recently, the person who kept the envelope received news that shook them. Not tragic news, but urgent enough to make them recognize how quickly opportunities disappear. They realized that waiting for the perfect moment had become another form of hiding. That evening, with the letter spread across the table, they called someone. The first call was not to you. It was to the family member who had demanded years ago that the truth remain buried. The conversation began carefully. "I found the envelope," they said. Silence answered. Then a voice, older and weaker than it once had been, replied, "Put it back." "I can't. You don't understand what telling them will do." "No," the person at the table said. "I understand what not telling them has already done." The rain softened outside. For a while, neither person spoke. Then the voice on the phone asked a question that revealed just how deep the secret went. "Did you read the second page?" The person at the table looked down. There had only been one page inside the envelope. At least, that was what they thought. They lifted the empty envelope and felt along the inside seam. Something was caught beneath the lining. Carefully, they tore the paper near the edge. A smaller folded note slipped onto the table. The person on the phone began to cry before it was even opened. Because they knew what it said. The hidden note was written by the family member whose name had been carefully removed from every version of the story you were told. It explained why your name had been chosen, but it also contained a confession, one that could alter your understanding of an important relationship. The reader unfolded it slowly. The first line was simple. "I need the child to know that I did not leave because I did not love them." Their hand froze. The room suddenly felt colder. Until that moment, the secret had seemed to be about a promise, a difficult night, and the meaning behind your name. But now it was clear that the name was connected to an absent someone whose role in your story had been rewritten to protect the family from questions no one wanted to answer. This person had not forgotten you. They had known your name. They had helped choose it. And according to the note, they had intended to return. But someone stopped them. The letter did not immediately say who. Instead, it described a meeting at a train station, an argument beneath a flickering platform light, and a small photograph kept inside a coat pocket. It spoke of a decision made under pressure. It mentioned money that had been offered and refused. Most unsettling of all, it referred to a promise that one person had broken. The reader turned the note over. There, written across the back, was a date. It was the same date your name had officially been recorded. Suddenly, details that had seemed unrelated began to connect. The late-night phone call. The elderly woman's declaration. The family argument. The missing second page. The discomfort that still appeared whenever anyone asked about your name. Your name had not merely honored a person or symbolized hope. It had been used as a signal. A message to someone who was no longer allowed near the family. The name said, "You have not been erased." And for years, someone had been waiting to know whether that message ever reached you. The person at the table pressed a hand against their mouth. They now understood why the truth had been feared. Revealing it would not only explain the past. It could reopen contact with someone the family had deliberately kept away. On the phone, the older voice said, "They can never know." But the person holding the letter looked again at your name on the envelope. Then they answered with a calmness that surprised even them. They already know something is missing. They have felt it their whole life. The call ended without agreement. The house became quiet. The person gathered the envelope, the original letter, and the hidden note. They placed them in a small box and carried it toward the front door. For the first time in years, the secret was no longer resting inside the cabinet. It was moving toward you. But before they could leave, headlights swept across the rain-darkened windows. A car pulled into the driveway. Someone had arrived. Not the person from the phone call. Someone else. The front door opened before there was time to hide the box. A figure stepped inside, removed a wet coat, and looked directly at the envelope in the person's hands. Their expression changed. "You found it," they said. There was no surprise in their voice. Only resignation. The person holding the box tightened their grip. "You knew it was here?" "I knew it was never destroyed." "Then tell me the truth. Who wrote the second note?" The visitor did not answer immediately. They walked toward the table, where the lamp cast a narrow circle of light across the torn envelope. Then they said your name. Not casually. Not affectionately. They spoke it like a password that had been kept for too long. And after a silence heavy with years of concealed choices, they revealed the one detail no one had expected. The person who wrote that note is still alive. The room seemed to stop around them. The reader stared at the visitor, unable to speak. Because according to every story your family had ever told, that person had been gone for years. But the visitor reached into their coat and placed a recent photograph beside the letter. On the back of the photograph was a message written only 3 days earlier. It contained your name. And beneath it, 7 words that would force the entire family to face what they had hidden. Please tell them I am ready now. My beloved child. The silence that filled the room after those 7 words was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence that comes when years of misunderstanding suddenly begin to fall away. No one reached for the photograph immediately. The person holding it simply stared at the familiar handwriting on the back. Every story they had believed for decades began unraveling, thread by thread. Memories that once seemed insignificant now carried new meaning. Forgotten conversations, unfinished sentences, nervous glances across family tables, unexpected tears during celebrations, all of them had been pointing toward a truth that had patiently waited beneath the surface. The secret had never existed to deceive you. It had grown from a chain of painful choices made by imperfect people who believed they were protecting everyone they loved. Yet with every passing year, the burden of hiding the truth became heavier than the truth itself. The visitor finally spoke again. They never stopped asking about you. Those simple words echoed through the room. Not once. Not occasionally. Always. The person whose existence had quietly shaped your story had carried your name in their heart through every passing season. Birthdays came and went. Holidays arrived and disappeared. New chapters unfolded, but one hope never faded, that one day the walls built by fear would finally come down. The old family stories had never been entirely false. They were simply incomplete. Some chapters had been left out because grief had clouded judgment. Others had been rewritten because guilt is often easier to live with than honesty. And a few disappeared because each generation believed the next would somehow know what had never been spoken aloud. But unspoken love has a way of finding its voice. The following morning, the family gathered in the same home where so many difficult conversations had once ended in silence. This time, no one hurried to change the subject. The weather outside had changed. The rain had disappeared, and soft morning light stretched across the wooden floor. Dust floated gently through the sunlight, illuminating photographs that suddenly looked different now that everyone understood the story behind them. The oldest member of the family stood first. With trembling hands, they placed the faded envelope in the center of the table. "I've carried this long enough," they whispered. Another family member wiped away quiet tears before adding, "We thought we were protecting the future. Instead, we kept the past locked inside all of us." No one argued. No one defended old decisions. There was only honesty. One by one, each person shared the part of the story they had carried alone. Someone admitted they had been afraid. Someone confessed they had chosen silence over courage. Someone apologized for allowing assumptions to replace conversations. And someone finally spoke the name of the person who had been erased from the family narrative. Not with shame, but with love. As every missing piece found its place, something remarkable happened. The mystery surrounding your name no longer felt heavy. Instead, it became beautiful. Your name had never been chosen because of wealth, status, or tradition. It represented hope during despair. It represented forgiveness when resentment seemed easier. It represented the belief that broken relationships could one day become whole again. Every time someone spoke your name, whether they realized it or not, they were repeating a promise made long before you understood its meaning. That promise was never about perfection. It was about remembering that love deserves another chance. Days later, a long-awaited meeting finally took place. There were no dramatic speeches waiting at the doorway. No perfect words prepared in advance. Only two people standing face to face, separated by years that suddenly felt both impossibly long and surprisingly small. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence carried every unanswered question. Every missed birthday. Every imagined conversation. Every hope that refused to disappear. Then one voice quietly said, "I've practiced this moment in my heart for years." The other smiled through tears. "I think I have too." No accusation followed. No attempt was made to recover every lost year in a single afternoon. Instead, they began with something much smaller. They shared memories. They laughed over photographs. They filled empty spaces with stories that had waited far too long to be told. Healing did not happen because the past changed. Healing happened because truth was finally welcomed into the room. As time passed, the family discovered something they never expected. The hidden secret had not divided them. Keeping it hidden had. Once the truth was spoken with compassion, walls that had stood for decades slowly disappeared. Meals became warmer. Conversations became longer. Old traditions returned. New memories were created beside old ones. And every time your name was spoken, it no longer carried uncertainty. It carried gratitude. The elderly woman whose words had started everything had once said, "Do not let this child believe they arrived by accident." Now everyone finally understood what she meant. You were never simply another chapter in the family story. You became the turning point. Not because you solved everyone's problems. Not because you were expected to carry anyone else's burdens. But because your life reminded people that hope often enters quietly, changing hearts long before anyone notices. Perhaps that is the greatest hidden secret of all. Sometimes a name is more than a collection of letters. Sometimes it becomes a bridge between yesterday and tomorrow. Sometimes it reminds people of promises worth keeping. And sometimes it quietly teaches an entire family that love becomes strongest when truth is no longer afraid. So if this story has found its way into your heart today, let it remind you of something timeless. Every family carries stories that remain unfinished until someone chooses compassion over fear. Every generation has the opportunity to replace silence with understanding. And every new beginning starts with one courageous decision to tell the truth with kindness. May your path be filled with wisdom whenever questions arise. May your heart always recognize love even when it arrives after a long journey. May peace replace every hidden burden. May forgiveness bloom where old hurts once remained. May your life continue to become a blessing for everyone whose path crosses yours. And may you always remember that your true worth is never defined by the secrets of the past, but by the love, hope, and grace you choose to share each new day. If this fictional story touched your heart, brought you hope, or reminded you of the healing power of truth, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a message of encouragement today. Until we meet again, may peace walk beside you, may hope remain within you, and may every new chapter of your journey be filled with light.